We've been looking at various types of hope and where that is from. And I'd like to ask you again just a few questions. What would you like to be remembered for? Do you think you will be known for your successes or your failures? What will be God's opinion of you? In other words, what is your legacy? Just thinking back over some of the programs we've had in the series so far, if I believe that I was created with purpose, that money can't buy my security, if I believe that God accepts me despite my rusty armor, and He guarantees our relationship, then I have nothing to worry about. It's interesting what is said about the old King David. In the New Testament, in Acts, it says, "I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will." That's a pretty amazing affirmation for David. So what was his legacy? We will look at this, and we'll look at various aspects of his life. First of all, the shepherd boy, the musician, the giant killer, the fugitive, the king, but we'll also look at his failures. Okay, first of all, the shepherd boy. He was the youngest of 7 sons. And in that culture, when you're the youngest, you're the servant of everybody, and of dad, of course. We don't hear about mum, so maybe she died in childbirth, or we're not sure. She's not mentioned anyway. But he was not just a little kid. You know, we often hear the stories and sing the songs of this little boy David, but when we see the main actions, he's not a little kid. He's a skilled harp player. He's accurate with the sling. Now, what does that mean? We're not talking about a slingshot, you know, with these little kids use them today. No, we're not talking about that. I saw once a sling stone in a museum, and it's like a tennis ball. It's rock that is made that size, and it is put in a leather pouch that is slung around and then released, and that projectile becomes a deadly weapon. And that young man mentioned that he had killed a bear and a lion with that thing. It's not a toy. He was very brave with those dangerous animals. And being a shepherd, those animals would have come to the sheep to prey on them. And so he was able to kill a couple of those. When we look at David the musician, the king was suffering some kind of mental illness. So in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 14 to 18, "Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. And Saul's servant said to him, 'Behold now, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre, and when the evil spirit from God is upon you, he will play it, and you will be well.'" So that's rather interesting. Whatever it was that caused this mental torment, if he could hear that beautiful harp music, then it would restore him and he would be okay. So when David came on the scene, obviously he was as a great musician. So he wasn't just out watching the sheep, he obviously had opportunities to let his musical talents be heard. His music refreshed the king to such a point that the king says, "I want you to do more than just refresh me with music. I want you to be my armor bearer." An armor bearer was there to hold the various weapons that the warrior had, and there were various kinds of javelin and spear, various swords and knives, and of course a big shield, one of these full body shields that he could hold, and so that if any arrows were coming, he could protect himself and the warrior that he was beside. So this was a real privilege for David to be asked by the king to do that. And then we look at David the giant killer. It's interesting that when he was out still watching his father's sheep as a youth, his brothers, his older brothers, went off to serve the king in battle. And we see that David went backwards and forwards from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. In those days, the army wasn't fed by the country, the national military, whatever. It was fed by the individual families providing food to their soldiers. And so David is going backwards and forwards from home to the battlefield to give food to his brothers and back again. And on one occasion that he does this, he hears something. He hears this soldier from the enemy camp yelling out all kinds of curses and challenges and insults. And David is bemused that no one's doing anything about this. And he hears the voice, and he's edging close to the view where he can see what is going on. Who is this guy? And he looks out and he sees, and he thinks, oh, okay, this guy is a giant. He's head and shoulders above everybody. And he's so annoyed by this, he says, look, if you are all chicken to do this, I will do it. Just let me at this guy. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Is this young guy like all teenagers who's indestructible? Nothing's going to hurt them? It might happen to the other guy, but it won't happen to me. Maybe there's a bit of that. But he's also very confident that God will look after him. And he has evidence for that. He says, look, I have fought big lions and big bears. I know how to deal with monsters. Because of these boasts almost, a few of the soldiers sent message to the king, hey, there's a guy there that reckons he can do this. And so he was called in front of the king. The king looks this young guy up and down. He might look strangely familiar. Well, of course he had to have been, because he had been playing the harp for him, but it seems to be non-recognizable at this time. He didn't connect that this is my harp player or this is my armor bearer. And so he says, well, here's my armor, wear this. You can't wear what you got on. You got your shepherd's clothes on. You can't wear my armor. So David gets into this suit, but Saul is head and shoulders above everybody else too. So this stuff just hangs loosely on him, and David can hardly move. It's so cumbersome. He said, look, I can't do this. I can't do this. I've got to face him in my own clothes. So he says that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that's kind of the strength that he goes out with. Now, when that happens, of course, David is the hero. He's accepted into the court of the king, and he is kind of accepted, as I said, as part of the family. But Saul becomes a bit, because of his mental condition, mental illness, he starts to see David as a threat. And he tries to kill David on a number of occasions. He almost pins him to the wall as he throws a javelin at him when David is playing his harp. And so he has to escape. He flees. And as he flees, a number of men surround him and join him. They're fugitives also of the realm. So maybe Saul's craziness has driven a number of people away from home. So these men are hiding in caves and living up in the mountains and down in the wadis by the Dead Sea. And on one occasion, these men heard that Saul is coming, so they go into a cave and hide in the back recesses of this cave. And are surprised one day when there's a person that enters the mouth of this cave, and it's Saul, the king. And he comes into this cave to relieve himself. And as he's squatting down doing his thing, the soldiers next to David nudge him. Now's your chance, man, go and get him. And he says, no, I can't do this. I can't kill the one that God has anointed to be king. And so they say, well, you know, do something. So he cuts off a little piece of his garment. And Saul finishes his business and goes out. And then from a safe distance, David calls out, hey, Saul, do you notice that there's something missing from your robe? Pretty brave action. But anyway, after a long while, Saul is killed in battle, and David becomes king. One of the first things he does is to conduct the military census. And that's one of his failures, his first failure. Because what he is doing this for is to show how strong and important militarily that he is. There's no question that he's been incredibly successful militarily. But when he starts to number his troops and to conduct the military census, who's out there that could join the army? And this was a mistake. The second big mistake was the time that he's up on his roof looking out and he sees this gorgeous woman bathing. And he lusts after her, calls for her, impregnates her. And then when he finds out that this woman is expecting his child, he says, well, we've got to get the husband here, who was out on the battlefield. And so he sends a message to the commander and says, send this guy home, will you? Trying to get this guy to go home and sleep with his wife so that then the suspicions are off the king. But this guy is so loyal to his men, he says, look, I cannot afford to go and have the comforts of home and sleep with my wife while all of my friends, my comrades, my army colleagues are out in battle in the worst of conditions. I cannot do it. And he didn't sleep with his wife, he refused. So David then sends to the commander, in the hand of this guy, go back and now give this letter to your commander. And he does, and this letter is saying, send this guy to the hottest part of the battle to ensure that he's killed. It's very sad that later on, when David's life is described, this particular soldier, Uriah the Hittite, a foreigner, just so happens to be one of David's 30 most trusted soldiers. I mean, how low can you go? You sleep with the guy's wife and then you kill him just because you can, because you're king. How low can you go? And then things sort of come unstuck after that. One of his sons, Amnon, rapes his sister. Absalom kills Amnon. Absalom has a coup. These are his sons. He has a coup and he is killed in battle, and David is just distraught that so much wrong is happening in his family. So again, we ask the question, what is David's legacy? We know him as the one that killed Goliath, and even in secular parlance today, everyone faces a Goliath, or you talk about the David and Goliath battle when there's a big court case between a little guy and the big corporation. But what is his legacy? The interesting thing is that he paved the way for the greatest servant of all, Jesus. They were born in the same town. Jesus was of the line of David. And so because of David, that messianic line came about. So what can we learn about this guy or from him? First of all, be willing to take risks for God, even at the risk of scorn. Because as he went out as a shepherd boy with a sling, this great warrior Goliath said, is this some kind of insult? Are you thinking I'm a dog that you come out to me with sticks and stones? And he scorned David because of the way he came out. We can learn, we don't need to worry about people scorning us. Serve well where you are. David was good as a shepherd, he was good as a musician, he was good as an armor bearer. Whatever he was asked to do, he did it well. We don't need to always aim for the top job. You make sure you do the bottom job well, and then that can show that you can be trusted for things higher up the ladder. And then, again, use the simple things at hand. He didn't have all the latest technology, the equipment of the king to fight. He had what he could use, what he was familiar with. And the other thing we learn from him, be guided by God's will. When we look at all of these things, we don't need to be disturbed by the mocking laughs of those who are fully equipped and fully financed. How many times have you been asked to do things where you haven't been equipped or financed, and yet God has blessed your efforts and you've done it anyway? Go in the strength and the power of God to meet the Goliaths of this world, so that we too can be someone after God's own heart, because He has given us hope beyond our personal failures.
of hope. Because our God has promised is our blessed assurance, and so undeserved we can have hope. Without faith in our Father, our God and Creator, we have hope. Because our God has promised, it's our blessed assurance, and so undeserved